Good afternoon. Welcome to the Shameless podcast live, starting back today. Been a couple weeks since we've been able to do this. Been a little on the busy side, so I do apologize, but wanted to try to get back to doing this again. I'm going to try this without headphones so I don't have to listen to myself that much. So, anyway, um, we're going to be back in it. We're going to be in the book of Revelation. This is the Sunday school edition of the Shameless podcast. And so we're going to get going a little bit. Just a couple of announcements. One, we have free-for-all on the 16th. So not this Friday, but next Friday. And then the biggest thing is this Saturday is our youth fundraiser. So the fundraiser helps cut the cost of camp tremendously. We'll be making the announcements for camp and stuff on Sunday. Sign-up sheets will be available on Sunday and all kinds of other fun, fancy stuff. So anyway, that being said, that's pretty much the biggest thing is if you have not signed up or needing to find something to take your significant other to, there you go. You can come to the spaghetti dinner. Donation only. For those that have donated, thank you so much. Anyway, that being said, all those fancy things aside, I want to really just kind of get into it. This is not an easy one. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is difficult in a lot of ways. So we're going to be in Revelation chapter 14, 14 through 20. And I know I didn't do one for really the last two in chapter 14, just because of time and everything. But last week was an amazing section. If you've not read it, chapter 14, 12, and 13 just really bring forth such a beautiful doctrine that I don't think gets talked about a lot in the perseverance of the saints, and the fact that God is the one that helps us persevere through the hard times and what's happening. And though it is directed towards the tribulation saints and stuff like that in chapter 14, that doctrine is throughout Scripture. If for whatever reason if you weren't there for that Sunday lesson and you want those notes, I'll be more than happy to get them for you, because it's such a beautiful doctrine that helps us understand who's really in control. So that being said, when we look at the last three lessons, this one right here, and the two before it, we have this picture, and I told the youth, I call this like the Oreo chapter, because you have three angels in 6 through 11 that bring forth one last chance of God's grace to repent and to turn, and then two angels immediately following, handling out, one speaking of the judgment to come and one describing the judgment. And then you have this beautiful doctrine of God persevering and sustaining the believers through the trials and tribulations that they're going through. And then what we have coming forth in just a minute is another, or actually the judgments basically being described. And so you have judgment, and then you have this like beautiful, delicious perseverance of the saints. So call it the Oreo chapter. And so I want to just kind of dive into that and get going. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Revelation chapter 14, 14 through 20. And so we're going to read it, and then we'll just dive right on in. 14 through 20. Then I look, and behold, a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. And then he who sat on the clouds swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. And then another angel, the one who has the power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, "Put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe." And so the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. So yeah, fun times with this one. What we get in the very ending of chapter 14 is two harvests. We have the grain harvest and we have the grape harvest. And in these two harvests, we see pretty much the same, like 3 points. We get the reaper, we get the ripeness, and then we get the reaping. And now there is some discussion over what the harvests mean. And I'm going to do my best to kind of give as many of those possibilities. And then, like I've done throughout this book, try to show you why I believe the way I believe it. So, and where I fall at. And so there's more discussion really on the first harvest than there is the second. The real discussion is on the second one, what the harvest really entails. Where the grain harvest, I'm going to show you, is there's debate on what the harvesting actually means and so forth. And so it's really like three views on the grain harvest. There's really the same view on the grapes. It's just depending on a couple of things. And like I said, I'll try to explain it as best I can. Again, I'm just Drew, so my opinions really don't matter in this sketch. So anyway, that being said, in verse 14, we have the reaper. John again sees something that catches his eye, and the thing that he sees, as we will see in just a second, let me pull this back up, is a white cloud. And so the white cloud comes in, and we, granted, haven't been doing it in a podcast form, but I have discussed the white cloud and stuff like that before. And so don't want to get ahead of what's on the white cloud. So right now we just want to focus on the white cloud. The white cloud we've discussed before, and this image comes from Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. For the sake of time and everything, I'll just read it. I kept on looking, and the night visions, behold, with the clouds of heaven, and he came up to the Ancient of Days, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the people, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which will not pass away. His kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So Daniel, in his prophecy in chapter 7, sees one like the Son of Man sitting on clouds. Fast forward to Revelation, we see a white cloud, and behold, sitting on the white cloud is one like the Son of Man. And so, who sits on the cloud? And that, I believe it is Jesus. So we have Daniel's prophecy, we have this again, and there's going to be some other points that I'm going to get to in just a second, but he's coming to establish his kingdom, then the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. The white cloud symbolizes his glory and majesty. He is ready to take dominion, on which Daniel spoke. The reaper is sitting as he waits for the proper time to stand and begin to reap. So the first thing that is being questioned is this Jesus or is this an angel? And the reasoning for some believing that the one that sits on a white cloud is an angel is because there's going to be an angel in verse 15 that comes out and looks like he's giving him a command. And again, I'm not going to skip ahead to 15 just to make this point. I think we can make the point without going to 15, but and for me, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I'll show you why. The reason and why there are some that believe this, again, is because of the commands. But I want to finish this. Jesus, one of his favorite titles that he used was the Son of Man. He says it in Matthew chapter 8, verse 20, Matthew 9, verses 6 and 20 and 6. Also in chapter 24, verses 27 and 30. In Mark chapter 2, verse 10 and verse 28. In chapter 8, verse 31. In chapter 9, verse 9. In Luke chapter 6, 22. Luke chapter 7, 34. Luke chapter 9, 22, 12. Verse 8, John 5, 27, 6, 27, and 62, 8, and 28. You see the point. And what does Paul say in Philippians 2, verses 7 and 8? But he emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Now, the phrasing in Revelation states one like the Son of Man. And so we have Jesus with the definitive, the Son of Man. And so we have here like a Son of Man. And so we have to ask the question, why is that? Why is it not a definitive in like, all right, the Son of Man is sitting on the cloud? And to be down honest, we really don't know why John writes it this way. The only thing that kind of makes sense is he is giving more strength to the illusion of what Daniel wrote way back when. Daniel uses like a son of man. He does the same thing. John uses this same terminology all the way back in chapter 1, verse 13. And he said, in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to his feet, guided across his chest with a golden sash. Now, no one's really debating that that's Jesus. So I don't know why we're debating why it's not Jesus on the cloud. So just saying, if you wanted to be an angel, I'm not saying that that's, you're not going to heaven for that, but you got to give me some evidence, and I'm not seeing it. And the other things that we're going to see kind of make it more like Jesus, because we can continue with the verse, right? So if we go back to the verse, like a son of man having a golden crown on his head. Now, the golden crown on his head it means something very significant too. And again, why would an angel have a golden crown on his head? The word for crown here is not the word in the Greek. The word for crown is not the crown worn as like king. It's the diadem. It's the word used for the victor's crown or the triumphant crown. Like you've won the war, so you're being paraded into town with this winner's crown on your head. So the thought process that why would an angel be, again, this is what I'm saying. And so what does this actually depict? It depicts the Son of Man not as ruler, but as conquering his victims. He's got victory over his enemies, and in his hand is a sharp sickle. Now, I asked the kids, they used what a sickle was, and they explained it very well, but then they started AI and pictures, and it was just not even close. It was some weird like Lord of the Rings, like I don't know what it was. It looked like a big hammer. Anyway, a sickle is a long curved blade with a big giant broomstick. Some of the modern ones, and I use the term modern, would have like a handle right here, and so you would have it kind of like this and be able to kind of swing it back and forth. Most likely, this one was just a big broomstick, and you swipe left and right. And so, um, and it's funny because you think of the Grim Reaper, right? The Grim Reaper, skeleton phase, big cloak, but he has the sickle. I'm sorry, but reapers, sickles, see where it comes from. There you go. And so the sickles were used to harvest the grain. They were held with both hands. They swept back and forth, and the blade would cut the grain at the stalks at the ground. So it would just be one clean swipe. Everything falls down, and they would pick up everything that they need. So what we have here in verse 14, who the reaper is the Son of Man in his victor's crown, ready to take back what is his. And it's a mighty picture that we see him sitting on the cloud. In verse 15, we see the ripeness, and we get introduced to the fourth angel. So from verse 1 all the way to verse 20, we get introduced to angel after angel. This would be the fourth one. We get introduced to the first three in verses 6 through 11. And these three bring forth the grace, then the hey, judgment's coming, and then here's judgment. Now we get the fourth angel coming to talk with the one sitting on the cloud. And then his job is to bring forth the command to execute the judgment. Like I stated before, some think the one sitting on the cloud is an angel because of this. But what we see here is the angel coming from the temple. Who's in the temple? The Father's in the temple. And he's relaying the message from God the Father to Son that the time is now for him to move into judgment because the earth is ripe. Now, the next discussion is, what does it mean? What does it mean that the earth is ripe? And so there were several different takes. The first one is he's separating the wheat from the tares. Like he's bringing forth those final few that believe and have repented and have put their trust in him and have obeyed him throughout this terrible time. He's gathering the wheat from the tares and he's bringing them home. Now, that is an awesome thing, but it is not what is happening here. It's possible, but I think once I explain a couple more things, I think you will see that it's not the case. Another view is that, and the one I hold on to as well, is that the Son of Man is bringing forth judgment to the earth. John MacArthur states that this is the bowl judgments that we will read about in chapter 16 in a couple weeks. But one commentator just believes that it's just, he doesn't really specify that as bowl judgments, but it is, again, Jesus bringing forth the judgment from the Father. And the reasoning for this is the word used for ripe doesn't mean healthy. It means rotten. It's no more good. It's deteriorated. It's ready to be, it's dried up. It's withered up. And with grain, if it's dried up, withered up, it's no good. And the only thing it's good for is to just throw in the fire and be done with it. And that's what is being depicted. So if you want to believe that he's on the cloud and he's coming forth to separate the wheat from the tares and to bring those that are left home, it's fine. But the original languages do not agree with this. The word for ripe means something completely different. And so, and the question was, why did they use the word ripe? because the English language is terrible. All right, this is going to break it down real quick. What we see is that we have a bunch of lifeless people ready for judgment. That's what this is entailing, and Christ is bringing it forward. Now, the reaping, like I stated in verse 16, like I said, MacArthur refers to this as the bowl judgments, and to be darn honest, I don't like to skip ahead. And so I'm leaving this. You're just gonna have to stay tuned with me and wait for chapter 16, and we start discussing the bowl judgments. But you will see why he believes this and why I believe this in the coming weeks. But and if you're interested, you can by all means start reading chapter 16 and seeing this. But this is what I believe this harvest is, and it'll make more sense once we get into the other one and I explain what I believe that one is. And so, with that being said, we'll look at verse 17. Verse 17, we get into the grape harvest, and we'll bring that up real quick. And then another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. And so the first reaper was the Son of Man. The second one is an angel. And what we're introduced to now, the fifth angel in this chapter, and this angel is not the Son of Man, but an angel. He comes out of the temple just like the fourth one. And like the Son of Man, he has a sickle in his hand. The interesting thing is we see angels assisting in all of the activities that happen in the tribulation throughout all of Revelation. They blow the trumpets, they bring forth earthquakes, they do a whole bunch of stuff. So it's not unimaginable that an angel would also bring forth another judgment, bring forth another reaping and gathering of things. And so this is not surprising. This again kind of helps the other people that view that the first one is an angel because the second one is an angel, but look at how they're described. There's no denying what a son of man is and what an angel is. John has seen thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of angels through his visions through the book of Revelation. He hasn't wrongfully described one yet. So what we have is we have the Son of Man in the first reaping. We have an angel in the second one. Now we see in verse 18 the ripeness. In verse 18, and another angel who has the power of fire came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice from the vine. He called from a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because the grapes are ripe." I forgot to share my screen. So anyway, side point. Threw me off for a second. I apologize. John sees the other angel, and this makes 6, if y'all been counting. But this one has the power over fire. And it seems to show that he is closely associated with the altar. And this altar is mentioned in chapter 6. But for those that do not remember or have not been a part of this is the altar of incense. This is a representation of what was in the temple back in Exodus. There's a lot of close. If I've not told you this, I know I've told it in a live setting in Sunday school. You have to know your Old Testament for the book of Revelation to make sense. Period. That's why it's such a difficult book, is because we don't really know our Old Testament. There's so much that lines up from Old Testament to this. It's going to be real difficult. And so knowing how the temple was laid out and the altar of incense and stuff like that, what we have is a heavenly altar of incense where the incense would go up from the temple on earth and go into the temple in heaven. That's kind of the imagery that we have here. And so anyway, but for those that have not been, the altar incense is where the prayers of the saints. So in chapters 6 and 7 and 8, and I'll read what chapter 8 says in just a second, but we have the martyrs that have been martyred. We have the saints that are praying to God, and they're basically saying, "How long, O Lord, are you going to wait for your judgment?" And chapter 8, verses 3 through 5. Another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. And smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hands. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire of the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there followed peals of thunder, sounds of flashings of lightning, and earthquakes. This angel does not come from the throne of God, but comes from the altar associated with the prayers of the saints. So what we have in chapter 8, I believe this is the same angel. He has the power. He's throwing the fire thing down. Like, I think this is the same one. I don't have evidence upon evidence on that. It just makes a lot of sense that this is really the same one. This angel does not come again like from the throne room, but from that altar. His appearance means that time has come for those prayers of how long, O Lord, are fixing to be answered. And the time has come for God to take the fire associated with intercession and use it for destructions of his enemies and the enemies of his people. Leaving the altar, he called out with a loud voice to gather the clusters of grapes from the vine of the earth because they are ripe. In answering to the saints' prayers, the time for judgment is here. The word used for ripe this time is different. It legitimately means it's ripe, it's plump, it's juicy, it's all that fancy stuff that you talk about when you talk about being ripe. The picture that we see here is Earth's wicked, ungenerate people are primed and ready for the harvest because they are plump and full of wickedness. It is the depiction of just total depravity and forcibly denying and rejecting God and doing the things that he's doing, and it is time for them to be gathered. And what we see coming in verses 19 and 20 are the spoils of their wickedness that they have. In verses 19 and 20, see if I can remember to share it this time. There we go. So the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress and up to the horse's bridle for a distance of 200 miles. Like the grain, I believe that this judgment is something else, that there is something that I believe that one is for, that you have some that believe one is for being the saved people and one is for the unregenerate people, where I believe everything is for the wicked. Like, it's wicked. Those that can survive the bowl judgments, you didn't get out lucky. In fact, you probably got off a whole lot worse. Some look at this judgment. So those that look at the first judgment as, all right, the people are dead, they're withered, they're lifeless, they're being burned up. And then the second one, what we see is this false religion system that is good. Like, you have the Antichrist and this false prophet, and he's been promoting all this stuff. So it's full and it has life. And this is what is being squished out with the grapes being trodden and stuff like that. And I don't agree with that either. I agree with them saying wicked and wicked, but other than that, I'm not following. I believe that this lines up with what is going to be taught in the chapter 19, that this is the battle of Armageddon. This is the reason why I think those that make it out of the bowls and think they went, woohoo, I'm out of it. No, you're probably getting it worse. And so, and there's a lot to kind of prove on this. And so here we go. The angel swings his sickle, and all those that have survived the bowl judgments will be gathered up and put into the winepress of God's wrath. A wine press back in that time were two stone basins, and they were connected with like a trough type of thing. The grapes were then trampled on in the top, and the juice would flow from the top to the bottom into the bottom basin. And this is the imagery of what's going to happen. The splattering of the juice as the grapes are stomped vividly pictures the splattering of blood to those who will be destroyed. Isaiah chapter 63, verse 3. I have trodden the wine through alone, and from the peoples there was no man with me. I also trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath, and their lifeblood is sprinkled on my garments, and I stained all of my remnants. In Joel chapter 3:13, put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come tread, for the winepress is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. The winepress will be trodden outside the city. This means that the Lord will protect Jerusalem from the carnage of the battle, which will take place about 60 miles north of the city. The interesting thing is we'll dive deeper in this once we get into chapter 19, just like verse 16 and the bowls. I don't want to skip ahead. I like everything kind of flowing like it is. So if you don't like that, read ahead. But a few things that makes me believe that this is the battle here is that the battle takes place over all of Israel. The statement that the blood will flow for a distance of 200 miles is the distance of all Israel. Israel in its whole is 184 miles. The 200 miles the literal translation was 1,600 strata, which if you convert, ultimately kind of converts almost to 184. So I guess everything rounds up. I don't know. That's how I live life, is rounding up. So the blood flows for all of Israel and up to the horse's bridle. This means it's going to be 4 foot deep. And so picture this, and it's, I guess, nutshell, whole, however you want to say it, but you have a massive battle covering a massive span, and its carnage is extremely deep. There's only one battle for that. And for those that think or have tried to figure out, all right, how does the battle work? I think I'm showing you right here. It's not a battle. It's a slaughter. If you're on the wrong side, it's not going to be good for you. Fun times. So, in closing, was the application? Unfortunately, for an unbeliever, the future is frightening. We've seen God be merciful and gracious. Now we're fixing him to see him to be just and righteous, because he's holy and he's pure. The author of Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31 says, it is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. So what should we do? Well, I think we should be like the psalmist in Psalms chapter 2, verse 12. Do homage to the Son, that he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. What's the looks to be good or whatever? Look at it in this aspect. We can look at a passage of scripture like this and we can just be like, man, I just cannot believe God would do this. But the better question becomes, is why wouldn't he? How patient has he been with all of us? How patient has he been with the entire world? Let's pull aside our country and the downfall it has become morally because of our unwillingness as believers and Christians to stand upon the truth. The whole world is infected with sin, and yet he has been patient. He has been merciful and he has been gracious, but it is going to end. And we don't know the time and we don't know the place, but it is going to end. I told them, I said, there's a lot of things that are speculated and guessed upon when it comes to the book of Revelation. There are 3 things that are no doubt. You do not have to figure out the truthness of this. There's 3 points of this. He's coming back. He's going to be triumphant, and you better be ready. That is it. Are there other things in the book? Yes. Are there fun things in the book that we can discuss and debate and have all these things? And once we get to heaven, we can all look at each other and go, you were right and I was wrong, and I was right and you were wrong, and all kinds of other fancy stuff that comes about it. 3 things. He's coming back. He's going to be triumphant, and you better know which side you're on. And so for the ones that believe, where are you standing? I've watched compromise after compromise after compromise when it comes to believers, that we do things out of love for whatever reason. And unfortunately, for those that are watching me, compromising out of love is not love. We cannot compromise upon the truth. When we see what is coming their way, though they might not like what we tell them, the most loving thing we can do for an unbeliever is to tell them the truth. Now, we don't have to be judgmental upon it, but we need to tell them the truth. There should be an urgency with us. And I'll leave it with this. As a believer, we see what the unbeliever is fixing to deal with whenever it happens. I think what we see here with the angel telling the Son it is time, I think we see what Jesus stated when he says, even the Son of Man doesn't know the time. He's waiting for the Father to tell him when to do it. But when we as believers live the same life as the unbeliever, what good are we? And if we're not willing to tell the unbeliever the truth, what good are we? And as the great theologian in the movie Joe Dirt says, and Joe Dirt's mom, is what you're doing right now what you want to be doing when he comes back? 3 things. He's coming back. He will be triumphant. It is not, is he or will he? He will be triumphant. And are you ready for it? These are the words. And this is a hard thing to look at. When we see the beauty of what came before this, with God taking care of his elect, his people, and what happens to those that reject it. And to think about what life has become when we have decided that there is no need for God. It breaks our hearts to understand that there are people in this world that are going to have to deal with this. Are you ready? And are you willing to tell others about it? That's the so what. That's why it matters. We can guess and we can decide certain things. At the end of the day, the book is very clear. The earth is going to be judged. It's going to be judged wholly and perfectly because he is holy and perfect. Now is an opportunity for you to skip all of that. Until the next time, may God richly bless you in all ways. Thank you for watching and listening. See you next time. Peace.